When one is horrible, it means that there is nothing that is objectively good and progressive that will come out of such individual.
If you have been convicted of an offense before and you have been pardoned, and anybody is trying to bring that up against you and calling you a convict, you have the power to sue that person for defamation.
Justice must not only be done, but it must be seen by all to have been manifestly done.
Every citizen has a right and every citizen has an obligation.
That a plea of ultra-virus acquit or convict is very different from the plea of pardon.
Trespass is that act that interferes with the peaceful.
No matter how minute
of this right, no matter how minute.
Who comes to equity must come with clean hands. Hello out there, you are welcome to another fresh episode of the program Justify Nigeria on ACNN television, reaching you from Abuja. On today's episode, our topic will be on the legal concept of nuisance. My name is Anozechi, I'm so your uncle. In a world that is full of challenges, in a society where it seems as if law and order is no more available and practicable, the thought of nuisance has come to address all this. The thought of nuisance protects the right to the use or enjoyment of land, an interest in land, or any part of the environment. Suffice it to say that what constitutes a nuisance is perhaps incapable of a useful generic definition. One common feature of all nuisances is that they may consist not of momentary acts or conducts, but a continuing state of affairs with such frequency to the extent that the state of affairs or conduct becomes unreasonable. What then is nuisance? What can constitute the thought of nuisance? How can one suffer damage or damages in nuisance? Are there remedies and types of nuisance? With me in the studio to make sense of it all is Barrister Obinonya. Barrister Obinonya is a senior associate at Dr. Onyechi Bazu ACNN Co., member Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, and also an Abuja-based legal practitioner. You're welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. You are here again.
Yes.
Now, we talk about nuisance, but you agree with me that the viewers out there that are not lawyers will not know what nuisance is all about. Yes. So, based on legal perspective and the understanding of our viewers, or non-lawyers, if I may put it that way, what is nuisance?
Okay, in very general terms, nuisance is any act, omission, or conduct which is harmful to a third party or the public. So where my act or omission constitutes an inconvenience or something harmful to a third party or to the public at large, then I will be said to be constituting nuisance.
Because you talked about when you act or omission, I understand act. So it's possible for someone to make an omission and it will...
Yes. So,
can you paint a scenario to illustrate that?
An omission,
yes,
for instance, could be the failure to do what you're supposed to do. Okay, for instance, if I leave my refuse to gather in front of my gate and then it becomes a health risk to the neighborhood, okay, then my failure to do what I'm supposed to do now constitutes a nuisance.
Because it's an omission.
It's an omission. So you see, nuisance could be a positive act. I did something or I failed to do something which now has a consequence on a third party or members of the public. So nuisance generally could be an act or an omission, which has impacted on a third party or the members of the public.
And of course, when is the third party? Is it material whether it's a minor or is a major?
Yes.
Because you talked about third party,
yes.
Now must it be a major? Is there any class whereby which that will constitute?
It must be a human being, a single individual or more, or the public at large. But the most important thing is that a person has now been impacted by that your act. Then it's
nuisance. Thank you very much. Now, Council, are there types of nuisance?
Generally, there are two classes of nuisance. There is public and private nuisance. So public Private nuisance is where the act affects just an individual. For instance, I have a dog. I let my dog stray, and then it goes to bite a neighbor. Okay? For instance, so that it's affected one person. So that my keeping my animal has constituted nuisance to a third party. Now it could be public, where I have this big industrial generator that blasts so much fumes. So whenever I put on my generator, the whole neighborhood is now covered with black smoke. Okay? So it doesn't just affect one person, it affects a group of persons. Then that is public nuisance.
Okay, in that particular circumstance, it's now a public nuisance.
Exactly.
Now, okay, when the first illustration, if your dog strayed and it happens to bite 2, 3, 4, 5 people, is that private or public?
It's still private because it's not ascertainable, but it happens to more than one person. It doesn't make it public. But when I now do something which has impacted a group of persons, it's private because it's an incident. Okay, it's a one-off incident. Okay, my dog strayed, did something, and it's been called back. But where my generator now causes a problem to society, and then a public nuisance must not be to an individual. It could be against the government, for instance. Okay, let's give another example. I have a factory where I produce something. So after the production, the wastewater from the factory, I run it into a stream. Okay? So after producing whatever we produce, you now run the wastewater into a stream and then pollutes the streams that service the public. Okay? So you now see it's now this is a better explanation. So you see that you can't ascertain the number of persons who are impacted by that my act. Okay?
So in that circumstance, it's a public
nuisance. So it's public, and generally in very loose terms, it's the government, okay, that can sue in public nuisance. However, where an individual says that he has been impacted over and above every other person, the individual can bring an action in public nuisance.
Okay.
But it's private with respect to when my dog goes to bite 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes.
Then 1, 2, 3, 4 has an action in private nuisance because it impacted them directly. Okay. But where it affected a wide spectrum of persons, then an individual cannot bring that action. It must now be the government, except that individual is saying that what I have suffered is over and above what every other person has suffered. Then he can maintain an action.
Okay. Maybe when he has a larger, damages and all that. Now, Council, what happens? It means this situation where these herdsmen just go into someone's farm and they destroy with their cows, and it has caused a little bit damage to the owner of the farm. Can that be nuisance?
Yes, it can sit. So, nuisance is under the family of what we call tortious liabilities. Tortious liabilities are private wrong or are wrongs. In civil law countries, they call it delict. Now, these are civil wrongs that have been done. So, where herdsmen let their cattle into a farm, yes, you can say it's private nuisance. One, it can also come under the tort of trespass. Okay, but so it should an action in nuisance can also stand because you are carrying out your business, your farm. Somebody comes into your farm and causes damage. Why not? So it causes nuisance, private nuisance, on which the individual can actually maintain an action and get damages for such trespass.
Thank you very much, Council. Now, you've just talked about nuisance. What it means in a nutshell, generally, is when somebody constitutes something that happens, injures another person, either your act or your mission. Well understood.
Or causes inconvenience.
Okay, that's another one now.
So it must not be an injury. It may be inconvenience. Okay.
For example, can you paint a scenario?
For example, if the smoke, okay, the smoke may not necessarily cause
a physical
injury. But there are other things that could be inconveniencing. For instance,
Maybe sound of generator.
Even music. Thank you. The sound of generator, the sound of music. When you have a neighbor who, by 12 a.m. in the night, he's blasting this music into your ears,
And the whole
place is vibrating.
So that's nuisance.
It's nuisance because it's an inconvenience. So you can't say it's a physical injury. No, there's no physical injury, but you won't be able to sleep well. Your family will be able to sleep, and then maybe you have a small baby in the house. The small baby is trying to sleep, and the music is blasting into the ears. It's an actionable wrong. So let me just take you back. The whole concept of nuisance is based on the neighbor principle, that my acts or conduct must be civil enough not to injure or inconvenience my neighbor. Okay, so in civil society, everybody must conduct himself in such a way that his acts or conduct is conducive enough not to impact on another person. And then when your act or conduct become a burden or become inconveniencing or becomes injurious to your neighbor, then it's a tortious wrong, and there are different heads of thought. So the whole idea, or whole concept of nuisance is conduct your affairs in such a manner that you live and let others live. That's just the principle.
Conduct yourself in a manner that you live and let others live. We're going to explain more on this when we come back for break. And the questions still remain. Are there damages? And of course, what are the exceptions if there are any? These and more you will get when we come back from break. Please do join us again. Hi, you are welcome to another episode or edition of The Speaker from ACNN Television, reaching you from Abuja. On today's edition, we are going to be looking at a phrase or sentence that says restructured Nigeria or an unrestructured Nigeria. My name is Anozechi Nomsu. The word restructuring is the corporate management term for the act of reorganizing the legal, ownership, operational, or the other structures of a company or entity for the purpose of making it more profitable or better organized for its present needs. Other reasons for restructuring include a change of situation in response to crisis. From all this, it could be simply understood that restructuring is aimed at providing positive solutions to put an end of existing problems. On the other hand, when an entity or polity is unrestructured, a prevailing crisis or rancor still subsists. With the kind of unrest, unease and crisis going on in Nigeria, I'm persuaded to ask on whether we are living in a restructured Nigeria or an unrestructured Nigeria. It is no more a news that Nigeria bleeds on a daily basis. There is no peace in the east, there is no rest in the west, there is no unity in the north, and there is no harmony in the south. In a situation where there is an industrial strike in Kaduna State over the sack of labor workers without following due process prescribed by the law, is a perfect example of an unrestructured Nigeria. In a situation where the Judiciary Staff Union of Nigeria, JSUN, have been on strike for some reasonable time, and the government seem not to be listening to their humble cry, is a clearer picture of unrestructured Nigeria. In a situation where we keep silent in the face of atrocity, taking it to be neutrality, is exactly the same as unrestructured Nigeria. Where the southern governors are calling for national dialogue, and former Vice President Atiku Abubakar is calling for dialogue of national unity, could be seen as an unrestructured Nigeria. As an individual, I suffer from a heavy moral burden when I see old men and women tell lies. I practically run away from them. How can it be that in Nigeria today, we knowingly and unknowingly collectively prioritize lies over truth, ignorance over knowledge, fake news over authentic news, sectionality and tribalism over nationality, timidity over courage, and crisis over peace? How can it be that the children of the poor that Nigeria requires to train today has taken up arms against all of us as bandits, terrorists, Boko Haram, and kidnappers. How can it be that the less privileged our politicians gave guns to snatch ballot boxes for them in an election yesterday have become hoodlums and unknown gunmen of today? How can it be that young graduates the government refused or failed to give jobs have become miscreants, area boys, and online internet scammers? All this can only be and exist in an unrestructured Nigeria. Why is it that our political leaders at the helm of affairs in Nigeria are not listening to anybody? How do they manage to sleep at night? Maybe we need to remind them that playing nonchalancy and pretending to be unaware of what is happening is not the solution to the problem. Maybe we need to remind them that nobody is safe in Nigeria anymore. Maybe we need to remind them that driving fleet of cars, flying private jets, and living in a well-furnished mansion with heavy security detail can never solve the problem of Nigeria. Maybe we need to remind them that traveling abroad on international meetings only to come back and display their photo sections can never stop Nigeria from bleeding. In order to justify Nigeria, I therefore speak. Until we all begin to prioritize truth over lies, knowledge over ignorance, unity over division, peace over war, dialogue over conflicts, give meaning to patriotism, bearing in mind that Nigeria is the only country we have, engage in honesty, diligence, and productive labor in our activities, and collectively assist our leaders in providing good governance by rendering sincere advice, objective and constructive opinion in order to achieve a desired result, we shall continue to have an unrestructured Nigeria instead of a restructured Nigeria. My name is Anozie Chinomso. I just want to speak. Glad to know that you are still there. We are here still with Barrister Obinonya. Barrister, before we went on a break, you have illustrated what Nuisance is all about, and the public, and of course that of private. And you said that the whole concept of everything is that live and let others live. Now, in a situation where we're here in our country, can a private person maintain an action of nuisance towards the government? Is it possible? For example, maybe where you have paid your NEPA bills and all that. You discover for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, no light. And on the 4th month, they are bringing another bill. In that circumstance, what happens?
Well, this example is really under the social contract. It's not exactly a tort. Okay. So social contract is the relationship between members of society and the government.
Okay.
There's a duty on the part of the members of society, and then there's a duty on the part of the government. When a member of society is saying that I have done all I should do, I've paid my taxes, I have performed my civil obligations, and the government are not reciprocating their own part, is a different category of course of action, different from a tort of nuisance. So in tort of nuisance, it's a civil wrong. Okay, not a contractual obligation. In fact, the example you're giving is actually more enforceable, but the problem is that Chapter 12, the issues of the duty of the government to the people, or the rights of an individual, rights to some rights or some constitutional rights, they will say they are not justiciable. I don't know what that means, even though some courts are beginning to interpret that. Okay,
the issue of justiciability and justifiability, they are two different things. In fact, we can't exhust it here now.
You understand? Yes. So, and it doesn't really come under the heads of tort. It's even, I think it's even a higher, for me, it's a higher degree of rights than the issue of tort. The issue of tort is just about inconvenience and injury suffered between individuals, or individuals and government.
Maybe when we'll be looking at social contracts, maybe we'll bring you back to
excellent.
do justice
that's where
to
we
that.
can actually
exactly, because we need to know what the government's supposed to do for their citizens, especially when you must have done all that is required of you as a citizen.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. Now, how can one suffer damage in thought of nuisance?
Okay, so like we said earlier, nuisance could be an inconvenience or an injury. So where is an injury? Generally, the law is that you'll be indemnified or you'll be compensated for the thing, the wrong that was done.
That's a big indemnified, please.
Indemnified is,
let's get it.
You'll be compensated. Yes, you'll be compensated for the injury or the inconvenience suffered. So usually there is no fixed standard to say, oh, this is the quantum or the quantity of injury you've suffered. But if you can actually prove the quantity of injury, for instance, if you say that the man put an industrial generator in a residential area, that this type of generator should not be in residential area, that he's been running this generator for 2 years, and as a result of running that generator, I now have chest-related issues. And from the medical report, the chest-related issues arose from smoke I've been inhaling. Okay? Then you can be able to bring a claim for damages to say, I paid X amount for medical bills, it damaged my whatever. So because of your ability to quantify what you have suffered, then you'll be able to be entitled to damages in quantifiable form. However, where it's an inconvenience, the loud music, your child not being able to sleep, the inconvenience,
the noise, maybe shouting, partying unnecessarily.
Exactly. Then the court will award general damages. Okay, it's really difficult to now quantify those damages. However, there's another head of damage which is called punitive or exemplary damage. So what the court will do in that circumstance is to say,
are there two types of them you're talking about? Punitive?
There are several types of damages.
Okay.
We've talked about the one to quantify the injury suffered.
Exactly.
Okay, that is specific or special damage.
Damage now.
If you can prove this is the quantum of damage I have suffered.
By bringing medical reports and all that, the money you spend, all those things, medical bills.
Good.
Okay.
That's one.
Okay.
Then if you're also saying that it cost me inconvenience, okay, my baby couldn't sleep, I was awake all night and all that. It's difficult to now place a value on what it is. But what the court now does in the circumstances, the court now falls back to what is called, if it is pleaded, if that's the case of the plaintiff, you now have follow back to what they call punitive damages or exemplary damage. Now, punitive or exemplary damage is a type of damage that acts as a deterrence, as like to teach the person a lesson or to set an example so that next time you must conduct yourself.
And others will also learn.
So in that case, the court will now award punitive or exemplary damages so that you now behave yourself or you now conduct yourself in a civil manner. So there's always the remedy. There's also the remedy of abatement. So in abatement, what you are saying is that the court will now give an order that this person should no longer continue that thing he used to do. This is actually abatement or injunctions. Okay, injunction will be to direct the person to stop doing that thing or reverse those things he was doing that were causing the inconvenience or the injury, or he should just injunction or abatement.
So in that circumstance of injunction, I think, of course, the plaintiff will go home satisfied now. In as much there's no maybe monetary compensation and all that, but
they go hand in hand. Actually, the money may not be all that, depending on what the court reasoning is. But the most important thing is that you allow a person to enjoy his own rights.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
now, Council, of course, there is this slogan you people have, Ubi juice, Ubi remedy. There is no cause without remedy.
Yes.
And you people also believe that for every general rule, there must be an exception.
Yes.
Now, based on those premises, are there exceptions to this?
Yes, there are exceptions to nuisance. One of the major exceptions is the principle on, I've forgotten that there's a Latin maxim that is called, I can't remember the Latin maxim exactly, but the point is that where you met the nuisance or the cause of that wrong there. Okay, I came upon the land and it's been like that. Okay, so there's no duty on me to correct or to reverse that wrong. Okay, so if that is the position, then you can't expect me, you cannot place that burden on me to go and undo or correct that thing.
Something that has been there before now.
Exactly. So that's just generally the major defense. And then if you're also saying that there is nothing reasonable, no step I could have reasonably taken to prevent the nuisance.
Objectively, of course,
Exactly.
in a reasonable man, and that circumstance, there is no.
If I've done all I should do, okay, there are things we call act of God. For instance, I have a pipeline, is sabotaged, and then the team begins to spray crude oil on the ground. You understand? I buried it properly, I did all I should do, and then somebody went and sabotaged it. There's nothing I could have reasonably done to have prevented that nuisance. Okay, so if a person has done all he should have done to prevent the nuisance, then it's a full defense in law.
No, thank you very much. Then cancel it quickly. This issue of some of our political elites are going to see the or siren everywhere. Can that constitute a nuisance? Because we want to enlighten our viewers so that they will know their rights. That's the sense of this program.
Yeah.
Can that constitute a nuisance? Everywhere you see, even a councillor, you see the person.
Or a councillor's wife.
A wife, or even a councillor's baby going to the hospital.
Yes.
So what happens in that circumstance?
Yes, so that falls under public nuisance. So that problem is not peculiar to me, it's not peculiar to you. Everybody suffers that problem. So it's now difficult for an individual to maintain an action against that public officer who is moving with the siren. So the action really lies in the government. It's actually the government that can maintain that action to say, oh, you should not do this, or pay damages for constituting noise pollution.
No wonder it's difficult for them to maintain an action, because it's just as if asking hyena to hang himself. that's how what it means.
Exactly.
You see, because you see some example, they will just knock off people going, and you see them being embarrassed and all that.
Yes. So except the person has suffered a damage peculiar to him, okay, then he can bring an action for that particular damage. But the issue of the noise pollution is affects everybody, so a singular individual cannot maintain an action in that regard.
Thank you very much. Your last word, just your last advice on this to the public.
Yes, so the whole idea of thought, like I said, is that your right ends where another person's right begins. So we must live in such a way that in enjoying our rights, we don't impact on our neighbor's rights.
We must enjoy our rights in order not to impact or infringe on another person's right, because where your right stops is where another person's own begins. We want to appreciate you, sir, for coming, and I pray when next we call you, you oblige us.
Pleasure,
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
From our discussion so far, we can see that there are two major types of nuisance: public and private nuisance. A public nuisance is a criminal offense, but becomes an actionable tort if it causes any special or peculiar damage to an individual's use or enjoyment of land or any part of the environment. When an individual claims that he suffered damages as a result of a public nuisance, he must prove direct, particular, or substantial damage in order to be able to sustain his action. Do not forget that a private citizen can sue in respect of a public nuisance in his own right, but must establish that he has suffered over and beyond the general inconvenience borne by the public as a result of the nuisance, and that the particular damage is direct and substantial. That was the decision of the Supreme Court in J.A. Adederon and others against Interland Transport Limited. It was reported in 1991 to NSCC Part 2707. Viewers, this is where we draw the curtain on today's episode of Justify Nigeria. Join us same time, same station on another fresh episode of the program. Until then, this is Samuel Zechin. So saying bye for now. When one is horrible, it means that there is nothing that is objectively good and progressive that will come out of such individual.
If you have been convicted of an offense before and you have been pardoned, and anybody is trying to bring that up against you and calling you a convict, you have the power to sue that person for defamation.
Justice must not only be done, but it must be seen by all to have been manifestly done.